The invitation arrived on ivory cardstock with a gold-embossed crest, an exclusive Vale family gala where old money still ruled. Amira Carter, a 33-year-old black CEO who'd built a tech empire from nothing, knew accepting meant walking into a test designed to make her feel small. They invited her because her company threatened theirs, because the merger required appearances. What the Vales didn't know was that Amira had survived worse than their thinly veiled racism. Tonight, wearing white and impossible to ignore, she'd discover just how far old money would go to protect its throne. And when Vivian Vale raised that champagne bottle with a cruel smile, she had no idea she was lighting the fuse that would bring down an entire dynasty. Just before we get back to it, I'd love to know where you're watching from today, and if you're enjoying these stories, make sure you're subscribed. The morning light filtered through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Amira Carter's corner office, casting long shadows across the mahogany desk where a single manila folder lay waiting. At 33, Amira had built something most people spent lifetimes chasing, a revolutionary tech infrastructure company that had quietly reshaped how cities managed their power grids, water systems, and digital networks. Her innovations weren't flashy. They didn't make headlines, but they made the world work better, and that mattered more than any spotlight ever could. She opened the folder with steady hands, though her heart quickened as she scanned the first page. Vale Global. The name alone carried weight. Old money, generational power, the kind of family that appeared in history books and society pages with equal frequency. The proposal was straightforward on paper, a $2.4 billion merger that would expand her technology into 42 countries, creating the largest infrastructure network on the planet. But Amira knew better than to read just the numbers. She understood what this deal represented beyond the financial windfall. A black woman leading a negotiation of this magnitude would send ripples through circles that still clutched their pearls at the idea of women like her sitting at their tables. The tech world had opened doors, sure, but the old money establishment, that was a different battlefield entirely. She leaned back in her chair, fingers steepled beneath her chin, and let herself imagine it. Her systems powering cities from New York to Singapore. Her team expanding. Her vision becoming the global standard. It was intoxicating and terrifying in equal measure. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in," she called, already knowing who it would be. Leon Grant entered with 2 cups of coffee, setting one on her desk before taking his usual seat across from her. Her chief operating officer had been with her since the beginning, back when they were operating out of a converted warehouse with more dreams than funding. He was the calm to her vision, the strategist to her innovation, and more importantly, the friend who told her the truth even when she didn't want to hear it. "You've read it," he said, nodding toward the folder. Not a question. Just finished. Amira took a sip of coffee, grateful for the warmth. "What do you think?" Leon set his cup down carefully. "I think it's the opportunity of a lifetime. I also think the Vale family is old guard conservative money, with a reputation for eating their partners alive." He paused, choosing his words. "There are rumors, Amira. Stories about how they treat people who don't fit their idea of what power should look like. Meaning people who look like me. Meaning exactly that." Leon's expression was serious. Vivian Vale especially. The sister. She's made headlines for the wrong reasons, throwing tantrums at charity events, publicly humiliating staff, making racist comments that her family's lawyers somehow always bury. The mother, Margot, is worse in some ways because she's subtle about it, calculated. Amira absorbed this, weighing it against the numbers in the folder. And Damien, the brother who'd be heading the merger? That's the interesting part. Leon pulled out his phone, scrolling through notes. By all accounts, he's different. Smart, genuinely interested in innovation, doesn't seem to share his family's worst tendencies. Some people think he's the black sheep trying to drag them into this century. Some people, Amira repeated. Not everyone. Not everyone, Leon agreed. Look, I'm not saying walk away. I'm saying be careful. These families don't play by the same rules we do. Before Amira could respond, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Carter, Damien Vale is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's important. Amira and Leon exchanged glances. She pressed the button. Give me 2 minutes, then send him in. Well, Leon said, standing. I guess we're about to get some answers. Stay, Amira said quickly. I want you here for this. Leon nodded and moved to the side of the office, a quiet presence that signaled this wasn't just a casual meeting. When Damien Vale walked through the door, Amira's first thought was that he looked less like a billionaire heir and more like someone who'd forgotten to sleep. His suit was impeccable, probably cost more than most people's cars. But there was something genuine in his tired eyes, something that seemed almost relieved when he saw her. Ms. Carter, he said, extending his hand. Thank you for seeing me without notice. I know it's unusual. His grip was firm but not aggressive. Amira gestured to the chair Leon had vacated. Mr. Vale, this is Leon Grant, my COO. I hope you don't mind him joining us. Of course not. Damien nodded to Leon before sitting, and Amira noticed he didn't seem bothered by the lack of privacy. I'll get straight to it. I know you received the proposal. I also know you're smart enough to have questions about why my family wants this merger. That's one way to put it, Amira said, settling back into her chair. I'm curious why you're here in person instead of letting the lawyers handle the courtship. Damien smiled slightly, a flash of something self-aware crossing his features. Because lawyers would tell you what you want to hear. I'd rather tell you the truth. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. My family's company is powerful, yes. Old, established, connected. But we've been coasting on legacy for too long. Your technology, what you've built, it's the future we should have been developing ourselves. We didn't. You did. So this is about acquisition, Leon interjected smoothly. Buying innovation you couldn't create. Partially, Damien admitted, not flinching. But it's more than that. This industry needs new leadership, fresh perspectives, someone who built something from nothing instead of inheriting it. His eyes met Amira's. We want you leading this expansion, not just your technology. You. Amira studied him, looking for the crack in the facade, the practiced pitch beneath the humble words. But what she saw was sincerity mixed with something else. Tension, as if he was bracing for something he couldn't quite name. Your sister, Amira said carefully. Vivienne. She'll be part of these negotiations. The tension crystallized. Damien's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Vivienne will be present at family events, yes. She's... He paused, seeming to wrestle with how much honesty was appropriate. She has strong opinions about the family business, about tradition. That's a diplomatic way of saying she won't like me, Amira said flatly. Damien didn't insult her intelligence by denying it. Vivienne struggles with change, with anything that disrupts her view of how things should be. But she doesn't control this deal. I do. The board does. And we all want this to work. Wanting something and making it happen aren't the same thing, Leon observed. No, Damien agreed. They're not. Which is why I'm here asking for a chance to prove we're serious, that this isn't just another corporate game. He stood, pulling an envelope from his jacket. This arrived at my office this morning. It's meant for you. Amira took the envelope, immediately recognizing the heavy cardstock, the embossed Vale family crest. Inside was an invitation written in elegant calligraphy, an exclusive charity gala at the Vale estate, hosted by Vivienne herself. The date was set for the following weekend. A gala, Amira said, not bothering to hide her skepticism. A tradition, Damien corrected gently. Before any major business partnerships, my family hosts an event. It's meant to be a symbol of mutual respect, a way to meet in a neutral social setting before the contracts get signed. Neutral? Leon repeated, his tone making clear what he thought of that description. Damien at least had the grace to look uncomfortable. I know how it sounds, but it would mean a lot to the board, to the merger itself. Your presence would signal that you're genuinely interested in partnership, not just transaction. Amira set the invitation on her desk, her mind already racing through the implications. A Vale family gala wouldn't be neutral. It would be a test, a stage where she'd be evaluated, judged, measured against standards that had nothing to do with her business acumen and everything to do with whether she fit their narrow definition of acceptable. I'll think about it, she said finally. Damien nodded, understanding he wouldn't get more than that today. That's all I can ask. He moved toward the door, then paused. Ms. Carter, Amira, if I may, I want you to know I've read everything about your company. Your innovations are brilliant, but what impressed me most was how you built it, with integrity, with people others overlooked. That matters to me, even if it doesn't matter to everyone in my family. After he left, silence filled the office for a long moment. Well, Leon said finally, that was either genuine or the best performance I've seen in years. Both, maybe, Amira murmured, still staring at the invitation. Did you catch how he talked about his sister? Like someone expecting a bomb to go off. Leon crossed his arms. This gala is a trap, Amira. You know that, right? They're going to put you on display, judge every word you say, every dress you wear. It's not about respect. It's about seeing if you know your place. I know exactly what it is. Amira picked up the invitation again, running her thumb over the embossed crest. Which is why I'm going to go. Amira, they want to test me. Fine. Let them test me. Her voice was calm, but steel ran through every word. I didn't build this company by being afraid of rooms full of people who underestimate me. I built it by walking into those rooms and proving them wrong. Leon sighed, but she could see the pride behind his concern. At least let me vet the security, and we're preparing responses for whatever social media storm this kicks up. Deal. Amira stood, moving to the window that overlooked the city. But Leon, I need you to understand something. This isn't just about the merger anymore. What is it about? She turned to face him, and the determination in her expression was absolute. It's about proving that someone like me, someone who doesn't come from their world, who doesn't look like them, who built everything from scratch, can stand in their ballroom and belong there just as much as they do, maybe more. The following days passed in a blur of preparation. News of the potential merger leaked. It always did. And Amira's phone exploded with calls from investors, reporters, and colleagues offering unsolicited advice. The tech world buzzed with speculation. The society pages whispered about whether she'd actually attend the gala. And through it all, Amira felt the weight of another call, one that came late on a Thursday evening when she was alone in her office. The number was unlisted. She almost didn't answer. Ms. Carter. The voice was smooth, cultured, with an edge of amusement. Victor Hale. I hope I'm not interrupting. Amira's hand tightened on the phone. Victor Hale, corporate shark, hostile takeover specialist, the man who'd tried to acquire her company 3 times through increasingly aggressive means. She'd shut him down each time, but he kept circling like he could smell blood in the water. Mr. Hale, I have exactly 30 seconds before I hang up. Then I'll be brief. She could hear the smile in his voice. I heard you received an invitation to the Vale Gala. Congratulations. That family only invites people they're planning to either acquire or destroy. The question is which category you fall into. And you called to tell me this out of the goodness of your heart. I called because the Vales don't like sharing control, Miss Carter. They never have. This merger, it's not about partnership. It's about absorbing you into their empire until there's nothing left of what made your company special. He paused. My offer still stands. $2 billion, full autonomy, and you keep your name on everything. I already told you no. That was before you walked into their trap. His tone shifted, losing the amusement. Be careful what you walk into. Old money doesn't play fair, and they especially don't like it when people like us, people who earned our way up, try to sit at their table. The line went dead before she could respond. Amira sat in the darkness of her office, Victor's words echoing in her mind. People like us. As if his ruthless acquisition strategies and her ethical business model were somehow the same thing. As if they were allies against the establishment instead of what they really were. Competitors with fundamentally different values. Still, his warning lingered. Not because she trusted him, but because he was right about one thing. The Vales didn't share power easily, and whatever this gala was, it wasn't really about charity or partnership. It was about control. The day of the gala arrived with perfect weather, crisp autumn air, golden sunset light, the kind of evening that belonged in magazines. Amira spent the afternoon with her styling team, a luxury she rarely indulged in, but one that felt necessary for this particular stage. When the white satin gown came out, her publicist hesitated. "It's beautiful," Maria said carefully, "but it's also very visible," Amira finished. "That's the point. You'll stand out." Exactly. The gown was modern, elegant, and utterly commanding. No jewelry except simple diamond studs. Hair pulled back in a sleek style that emphasized her bone structure. Makeup natural, but flawless. When Amira looked at herself in the mirror, she saw exactly what she intended. Someone who belonged anywhere she chose to be. Leon appeared at her door in a tailored suit, looking uncomfortable with the formality, but determined. "The car's ready. I'm riding with you. You hate these events. I hate the idea of you walking in there alone more." He offered his arm. "Besides, someone needs to run interference when society matrons start asking invasive questions about your background." The drive to the Vale estate took 40 minutes, winding through increasingly exclusive neighborhoods until they reached gates that looked like they guarded a palace instead of a private home. Security waved them through after checking the invitation, and the driveway stretched ahead like a challenge. Amira could see the estate now, massive, beautiful, dripping with the kind of wealth that came from centuries of accumulation. Lights blazed from every window. Luxury cars lined the circular drive. A string quartet played somewhere in the gardens. This was the world she was trying to enter. This was the test she'd chosen to take. "Last chance to turn around," Leon murmured. "Not happening." Amira stepped out of the car and immediately felt eyes turn toward her. Paparazzi lined the entrance, cameras flashing like strobe lights. Guests whispered behind gloved hands. Some faces showed admiration, others showed something colder. She lifted her chin and walked forward, every step deliberate. Damien appeared at the entrance almost immediately, and the relief on his face was unmistakable. He moved toward her quickly, positioning himself between her and the most aggressive photographers. "You came," he said, and she heard genuine gladness in his voice. "I don't make promises I don't keep." He offered his arm. "Let me walk you in. These reporters can be vultures." Amira hesitated for just a moment, aware of how this would look, how people would interpret them walking in together. Then accepted. Leon followed close behind, a protective shadow. Inside, the ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, art that probably cost more than most people earned in a lifetime. And everywhere, Guests in designer clothing, dripping with jewelry, speaking in the particular cadence of people who'd never worried about money a day in their lives. Amira felt their stares like physical weight. Some were curious, some approving, but others held thinly veiled resentment, as if her presence here was an intrusion rather than an invitation. Ms. Carter, a woman in diamonds, approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "How lovely that you could join us. I'm Catherine Bradford. My family has worked with the Vales for generations." "It's nice to meet you," Amira said politely, "and such a brave choice wearing white." Catherine's gaze traveled over the gown with something like pity. "So striking. You certainly won't blend into the background." The subtext was clear. "You don't belong here, and everyone can see it." Before Amira could respond, another voice cut through the conversation like ice. "Ms. Carter, what an unexpected pleasure." Amira turned to find Vivian Vale approaching and immediately understood why Damien had tensed when her name came up. Vivian was beautiful in the way money could create. Perfect hair, perfect dress, perfect jewelry. But her eyes were cold as they assessed Amira from head to toe. "Ms. Vale," Amira said evenly, "thank you for the invitation." "Of course." Vivian's smile was razor-sharp. "We believe in diversity. It's so important to support emerging leaders." The way she said emerging made it sound like a synonym for temporary. Damien stepped closer, his voice tight. "Vivian, perhaps we should—" "Oh, don't be tedious, Damien." Vivian waved him off, her attention still fixed on Amira. "I'm simply welcoming our guest. After all, it's not every day we have such interesting new faces at our little gatherings." The word interesting dripped with condescension. Leon moved closer to Amira's side, a silent support. But Amira didn't need protection from words. She'd faced worse than Vivian Vale's petty cruelty. "Your home is beautiful," Amira said calmly, "and the charity you're supporting tonight, children's literacy, is important work." "Yes, well, we do what we can for those less fortunate." Vivian's gaze sharpened. "Speaking of which, I heard your company focuses on infrastructure in underserved communities. How noble, almost like charity work itself." Amira smiled, refusing to take the bait. "Actually, we focus on infrastructure everywhere it's needed. Profit and social good aren't mutually exclusive." "How refreshingly idealistic." Vivienne raised her champagne glass. "Let's hope that idealism survives contact with the real world of high-stakes business." As Vivian glided away, Catherine Bradford leaned in conspiratorially. "Don't mind her. She's just protective of the family legacy. You understand." What Amira understood was that she'd just been marked as an outsider, a threat, someone who needed to be reminded of her place, and the night had barely begun. Dinner was announced, and Amira discovered the first petty cruelty. The seating chart had been altered. Instead of being placed at the main table with the Vale family and key business partners, she found herself assigned to what could only be called the guest overflow table, far from the center of power, surrounded by people who clearly didn't know why they were there either. Leon checked his phone, then showed Amira the screen. "The original chart had you at table 1. This was changed this afternoon." "Let me guess who made that call," Amira murmured. Across the room, Vivian caught her eye and offered a small shrug, her expression all innocence. "Oops, just an oversight." But everyone in the room knew better. This was intentional. A message. Amira took her seat with grace, refusing to show any reaction. She could feel cameras pointed in her direction, society photographers documenting everything. Good. Let them capture her composure. Let them see she wouldn't be rattled by such obvious games. The first course arrived, and Vivienne stood to make a toast. The room fell silent. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us tonight to support literacy programs across the country. Education is so important, especially for those who haven't had the same advantages many of us were born with. She paused, her gaze sliding toward Amira. Tonight, we also celebrate new partnerships, new faces in our business community. It's wonderful to see such diversity in leadership roles. The word diversity came out like something distasteful. So let us raise our glasses to new beginnings, to tradition welcoming innovation, and to ensuring that everyone, no matter their background, has a seat at the table, even if it's not always the head of the table. Polite laughter rippled through the crowd. Champagne glasses clinked, and Amira sat perfectly still, her smile never wavering, even as she felt the sting of humiliation wrapped in expensive words. Leon's hand found hers under the table, squeezing once. Steady. But across the ballroom, Margot Vale watched with calculating eyes, and her expression suggested the real games hadn't even begun yet. The tension from Vivienne's toast still hung in the air like smoke after a fire, acrid and unmistakable. Amira watched as dessert was served, delicate chocolate creations that probably cost more per plate than some families spent on groceries for a week. Around her, conversations flowed in that particular rhythm of the wealthy, all carefully modulated voices and strategic laughter. But she could feel eyes on her, assessing, judging, waiting for something she couldn't quite name. Leon leaned close, his voice low. "The car's ready whenever you want to leave. We've made our appearance. You don't owe these people anything more." Amira considered it. She'd proven her point, walked in with dignity, refused to be diminished by petty seating arrangements and veiled insults. She could leave now with her head high, and no one could say she'd been intimidated. But something made her stay. Maybe it was stubbornness. Maybe it was the principle of not letting Vivienne Vale drive her out of any room. Whatever it was, she stayed in her seat, sipping water, listening to the woman beside her drone, on about a Mediterranean yacht vacation. Across the ballroom, Vivienne stood near the bar, champagne bottle in hand as she held court with a cluster of similarly dressed women. Every few moments, her gaze would drift toward Amira, her expression darkening with something that looked like barely contained rage. Damien hovered nearby, tension visible in the set of his shoulders, as if he sensed something coming but couldn't quite identify the threat. Margot Vale moved through the crowd like a queen among subjects, stopping at various tables to exchange pleasantries. When she reached Amira's table, her smile was pleasant and utterly devoid of warmth. "Miss Carter, I hope you're enjoying the evening despite the little seating confusion." The word confusion made it clear. There had been no confusion at all. "It's been enlightening," Amira replied smoothly. "I'm sure it has." Margot's gaze swept over Amira's dress, lingering just long enough to feel deliberate. "You know, my family has hosted these events for 3 generations. We have certain traditions, certain ways of doing things that have served us well. Change can be uncomfortable, even when it's inevitable. I've found that the right kind of change usually makes things better, not just different." "How optimistic." Margot's smile sharpened. "But in families like ours, old families with deep roots, tradition isn't just preference. It's survival. We protect what we've built, fiercely if necessary." The threat was wrapped in silk, but it was a threat nonetheless. Before Amira could respond, Damien appeared at his mother's elbow, his jaw tight. "Mother, the Hendersons were asking for you. Something about the auction." Margot's eyes flicked between her son and Amira, reading the interruption for what it was. Protection. She didn't like being managed. "Of course. Ms. Carter, we'll speak again soon. I'm sure there's much to discuss about tradition and innovation finding common ground." As she glided away, Damien remained, and Amira could see the apology in his expression before he even spoke. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. This isn't how tonight was supposed to go. How was it supposed to go? He hesitated, then gestured to the room. Not like this. Not with you being treated like an outsider when you should be treated like the leader you are. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture that seemed uncharacteristically unpolished. My family. We're complicated, and some of us are having trouble accepting that the world has changed. Some of us, meaning your sister. Damien's silence was answer enough. Leon stood, touching Amira's shoulder. I'm going to make a call, back in 5 minutes. It was code, giving her space to have this conversation but staying close enough to intervene if needed. Once Leon was gone, Damien sat in the vacated chair, lowering his voice. Vivienne sees you as a threat. Not to the business. She doesn't care about the business the way I do. You're a threat to her idea of how things should be. Who should have power? Who belongs in rooms like this? Because I'm black. He flinched but didn't deny it. Because you're black. Because you're a woman. Because you built your success instead of inheriting it. All of it threatens her worldview. He met her eyes. I wish I could say she'd come around. But I've watched her destroy people who made her feel inferior. And you, your success, your grace, your intelligence, it makes her feel small. That's not my problem. No, Damien agreed. It's not, but it might become mine to manage. He glanced toward where Vivienne stood, and Amira saw genuine concern cross his features. She's been drinking more than usual tonight. When she gets like this, she becomes unpredictable. As if summoned by the words, Vivienne separated from her group, champagne bottle still in hand, and began walking toward their table. Her gait was steady enough, but there was something wild in her eyes, something that reminded Amira of storms gathering on distant horizons. Damien stood quickly. Vivienne? Don't, his sister snapped, not even looking at him. Her attention was laser-focused on Amira. I need to have a conversation with our guest of honor. Other guests began to notice the shift in atmosphere. Conversations quieted. People turned to watch. Somewhere, a photographer raised a camera. Amira remained seated, her hands folded calmly in her lap, though her pulse had quickened. She could see Leon moving back toward her from across the room, his expression alarmed. Vivienne stopped at the edge of Amira's table, and up close the rage in her expression was unmistakable. This wasn't just dislike or prejudice. This was fury, raw and barely contained. You must be so proud of yourself, Vivienne said, her voice pitched just loud enough to carry. Walking in here like you own the place, wearing that dress like you're making some kind of statement. I'm simply a guest at your event, Amira replied evenly. A guest? Vivienne laughed, the sound bitter. Is that what you call it? Because from where I'm standing, you look like someone trying to infiltrate a world that doesn't want you. The words landed like slaps. Around them, guests stared with a mixture of shock and fascination. This was the kind of scene that would be whispered about for months, maybe years. Damien moved closer, his voice tight with warning. Vivienne, that's enough. You're embarrassing yourself. I'm embarrassing myself? Vivienne whirled on him, her fury now splitting between two targets. You're the one who brought her here, who's been following her around all night like some pathetic. She caught herself, breathing hard, then turned back to Amira. You think you're so special, so smart, so deserving. Amira stood slowly, maintaining her composure even as her heart hammered. I think this conversation is over. It's over when I say it's over. Vivienne stepped closer, and Amira could smell the champagne on her breath, see the tremor in her hands. Women like you don't belong in rooms like this. You don't belong in my family's business. You certainly don't belong in my family's future. The room had gone completely silent now. Even the string quartet had stopped playing. Every eye was on them, every phone camera recording. I'm going to leave now. Amira said quietly, with all the dignity she could summon. "I hope you get the help you need." She turned to go, and that's when Vivienne raised the champagne bottle. Time seemed to slow down. Amira heard Damien shout his sister's name, heard Leon's voice calling out. But Vivienne was already tipping the bottle, and suddenly champagne was cascading over Amira's head, soaking her hair, her face, her beautiful white dress. The liquid was cold and shocking, running down her neck and shoulders, turning the elegant gown translucent and heavy. For a moment, Amira couldn't breathe, couldn't think. She just stood there, dripping, while camera flashes exploded like lightning and gasps echoed through the ballroom. Then somehow, she found stillness, found the core of steel that had carried her through every rejection, every dismissal, every moment when the world had tried to tell her she wasn't enough. She stood perfectly straight, champagne dripping from her chin, and didn't make a sound, didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't give Vivienne the satisfaction of breaking her. The silence was deafening. Damien grabbed his sister's arm, his face white with shock and fury. "What have you done?" "What needed to be done?" Vivienne's voice cracked, hysteria creeping in. "She was going to take everything from us. She was going to manipulate you, take our company, destroy our family's legacy. I'm protecting us." "You're insane," Damien breathed, and the devastation in his voice was complete. Margot Vale appeared as if materialized from the shadows, her expression unreadable as she took in the scene. Her daughter wild-eyed and screaming, her son horrified, and Amira standing in the center of it all like a statue carved from dignity itself. For one moment, Amira thought Margot might apologize, might show some humanity, some recognition that her daughter had just committed an unforgivable act of public humiliation. Instead, Margot's voice was cold and final. "I believe the evening is over for Ms. Carter." The words hit harder than the champagne had. Not an apology. Not even an acknowledgement that Vivienne was wrong. Just a dismissal, as if Amira was the problem that needed to be removed. The crowd's reaction was immediate, shocked murmurs, disapproving gasps, but not one person stepped forward to defend her. Not one guest challenged the Vale family's united front. They simply watched, bearing witness to cruelty disguised as aristocracy. Leon materialized at Amira's side, his jacket already off and draping it around her shoulders. His expression was murderous, but his voice was gentle. "Come on, let's get you out of here." Amira let him guide her, but she walked on her own power. Didn't let anyone support her as if she couldn't stand alone. She kept her chin up, her shoulders back, and walked through that ballroom with more grace than anyone else in it would ever possess. Behind her, she heard Vivienne still screaming. "She's manipulating all of you. She's manipulating Damien. She wants to destroy everything we've built." And she heard Damien's voice, broken and furious. "The only thing destroyed here is my respect for this family." The cool night air hit her face as they stepped outside, and only then did Amira allow herself to tremble. Leon kept his hand on her back, steady and grounding, as they moved past the cluster of photographers who surged forward with questions and flashing cameras. "Ms. Carter, what happened in there? Did Vivienne Vale assault you? Are you pressing charges? How does this affect the merger?" Leon pushed through them, his voice brooking no argument. "No comment, give her space." The car was waiting, and Amira climbed in with as much grace as she could manage while soaked in champagne and shock. The door closed, muffling the chaos outside, and suddenly they were moving down the long driveway, away from the estate, away from the nightmare the evening had become. Leon handed her his handkerchief, and Amira used it to wipe champagne from her eyes. Her hands were shaking now, the adrenaline finally catching up to her. "That woman is psychotic," Leon said, his voice tight with controlled rage. "And that family, standing there while she humiliated you." "They weren't standing there," Amira interrupted quietly. "They were participating. This wasn't just Vivienne. It was all of them." Her phone began buzzing incessantly. Text messages, calls, notifications piling up faster than she could process. Leon pulled out his own phone and his face went pale. "Amira, you need to see this." He turned the screen toward her and she saw her own face staring back from a trending news alert. The headline made her stomach drop. "Veil Gala explodes in racial humiliation scandal." Below it, photos. Vivienne pouring champagne over her head. Amira standing soaked and still. Margot Veil's cold dismissal. The images were already everywhere. Twitter, Instagram, news sites. The hashtags were multiplying by the second. "Vijay stand with Amira, Nij Veil scandal. Toxic old money." "It's viral," Leon said, scrolling through the feeds. "Completely viral. Every major outlet is picking it up." Amira's phone rang, and she saw her board chairman's name on the screen. She answered, her voice steadier than she felt. "James." "Amira, thank God. Are you all right?" "I'm fine." "The hell you are." James's voice was furious. "I just saw the footage. The entire board is seeing it. We're calling an emergency meeting in an hour. This merger is dead, Amira. Absolutely dead. No one on this board will allow our company to be associated with that family after what they just did to you." "James." "This isn't up for debate. We're suspending all negotiations effective immediately. Those people can rot." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice was gentler. "Are you somewhere safe? Do you need anything?" "I'm with Leon. I'm okay. Get home, get some rest. We'll handle the business side tomorrow. Tonight, just take care of yourself." After he hung up, Amira stared at her phone as more notifications poured in. Messages of support from colleagues, outraged statements from civil rights groups, and buried among them, 17 missed calls from Damien Veil. She didn't return them. By the time she reached her apartment, the story had spread even further. Leon helped her inside, then immediately got on the phone with her security team, arranging for increased protection at both her home and office. The world knew where she lived. The world knew where she worked. And the world was watching. Amira stood in her bathroom, looking at her reflection. The white dress ruined, her makeup streaked, her hair sticky with champagne. But her eyes were clear, steady, unbroken. She stripped off the dress and dropped it in the trash. She wouldn't keep it. Wouldn't preserve this moment like some kind of tragic memento. What Vivienne had meant as ultimate humiliation would not define her. The shower water ran hot, washing away the champagne, but not the memory of those flashing cameras, those silent guests, Margot Veil's cold dismissal. As Amira stood under the spray, she allowed herself 5 minutes of tears. 5 minutes of releasing the shock, the hurt, the violation of it all. Then she dried her eyes, got dressed, and walked back out to where Leon waited with his laptop open. "Show me everything," she said. They spent the next 2 hours monitoring the fallout. The story had transcended business news and entered mainstream consciousness. Cable news networks were running segments. Opinion pieces were being published in real time. Social media had erupted in a way that made previous controversies look tame. The video clips were damning. Vivienne's attack had been captured from multiple angles. There was no ambiguity, no way to spin it as anything other than what it was. A wealthy white woman publicly humiliating a successful black woman at a formal event, then doubling down with racist accusations about manipulation and not belonging. But what was resonating most with viewers wasn't just Vivienne's cruelty. It was Amira's response, or lack thereof. The way she'd stood there, composed and dignified, refusing to give her attacker the satisfaction of a reaction. The way she'd walked out with her head high despite being soaked and dismissed. The CEO who didn't bow, one headline called her. Another simply posted the image of her walking away with the caption, "Grace under fire." By midnight, the financial impact was becoming clear. Vail Global's stock had already begun tanking in after-hours trading. International investors were pulling back. Partners were issuing statements about reviewing their relationships with the company. And through it all, Damien kept calling, kept texting, kept leaving voicemails that Amira didn't listen to. Leon looked up from his screen, his expression grim. "There's something else you need to see." He turned the laptop toward her, showing a statement Vivienne had posted on social media an hour earlier. The text was brief and entirely unrepentant. "I stand by my actions tonight. Some people will do anything for attention and to manipulate their way into spaces where they don't belong." The backlash was immediate and vicious. Thousands of comments called her out. Verified accounts condemned her. But what struck Amira most was the simple fact that Vivienne couldn't see, or wouldn't, admit what she'd done wrong. "She's going to make this worse," Leon predicted. "People like her always do." He was right. By morning, the news cycle had become a firestorm. Vail Global's stock had plummeted 11% in the first hour of trading, wiping out hundreds of millions in value. The company's communications team was in full crisis mode, but every statement they released only seemed to fuel public outrage. Amira woke to find her phone already full of messages. Interview requests from every major network, statements of support from business leaders, celebrities, and politicians, invitations to speak at conferences, appear on podcasts, write op-eds. The world wanted to hear from her, but she wasn't ready to speak yet. Not until she understood the full scope of what was happening. Her board met that morning in emergency session, and Amira joined via video conference, still working from home to avoid the media circus that had gathered outside her office building. James opened the meeting with a fury she'd rarely seen from the usually calm chairman. "What happened last night was unconscionable. This board is unanimous in our decision to sever all negotiations with Vail Global. The merger is dead." The other board members nodded agreement, their faces reflecting the same outrage. "Furthermore," James continued, "we believe you should consider legal action against both Vivienne Vail and the family. What she did constitutes assault. What the family did by endorsing it constitutes a hostile environment." Amira listened, absorbing their words. She understood their anger, shared it even. But something about the situation felt incomplete, as if there were pieces she hadn't yet seen. "I appreciate your support," she said carefully. "But before we make any legal decisions, I want to see how this plays out. The court of public opinion is already delivering its verdict." And it was. By midday, the damage to Vail Global was accelerating. 3 major partners had publicly suspended their relationships with the company, pending a review. 2 board members had resigned in protest. Institutional investors were dumping stock as fast as they could. Most devastating was the statement from the Vail Global Employees Union. "We stand with Amira Carter and condemn the racist actions of the Vail family leadership. We call for immediate accountability and transparent investigation into the culture that enabled this incident." The empire was cracking from within. Damien's messages had become increasingly desperate. The most recent one, sent at 6 that morning, read, "Please let me explain. Please let me try to fix this. What my family did, what my sister did, it's unforgivable, but I'm begging you to let me try to make it right." Amira stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it. By afternoon, Victor Hale had made his move. A press release announced his intention to acquire 18% of Vail Global's plummeting stock, effectively launching a hostile takeover bid. Financial analysts called it the Vail bloodbath. News networks ran segments about the fall of an American dynasty. The predator had found his moment to strike. Leon appeared at Amira's apartment with food she hadn't asked for but definitely needed. As they sat together, eating in silence, her phone buzzed with yet another alert. This one made her pause. An anonymous email with no subject line. Just an attachment. Encrypted documents that required a password. The body of the email contained only one line. You deserve to know the truth about who you were dealing with. The password was integrity. Amira's fingers hovered over the keyboard. Every instinct told her this was important, possibly dangerous. Opening unknown files from anonymous sources was how people got hacked, compromised, destroyed. But something about that single word, integrity, felt deliberate. Felt like a message meant specifically for her. She opened the files. What she found inside made her blood run cold. Documents detailing years of financial fraud within Vale Global. Illegal acquisitions hidden through shell companies. Tax evasion schemes that would make prosecutors salivate. And at the center of it all, detailed evidence of Margot Vale's direct involvement in covering up multiple instances of discrimination, harassment, and abuse within the company. The timestamps were recent, the crimes were ongoing, and the documentation was thorough enough to hold up in any courtroom. Leon leaned over her shoulder, reading along, and she heard his sharp intake of breath. This is Amira. This is explosive. This would destroy them completely. Someone inside the company sent this. Amira scrolled through the files, her mind racing. Someone with access to everything. Someone who wanted me to have ammunition. But why? Who would risk this? Amira didn't answer, but her mind was already working through possibilities. Someone inside the Vale family structure, someone with high-level access, someone who'd watched Vivian's attack and decided enough was enough. Her phone rang. Damien's name appeared on the screen for what felt like the 100th time. This time Amira answered. Amira. His voice was raw, exhausted. Thank God. Please don't hang up. I'm listening. I know you have no reason to believe me. No reason to trust anything I say. But I need you to know. What happened last night wasn't just wrong. It was evil. My sister is... He broke off and she heard him struggling for composure. My family is imploding. Stock is crashing. Partners are fleeing. Employees are threatening walkouts. And none of it is punishment enough for what was done to you. Why are you calling me, Damien? Because I need you to understand that I had no idea. I knew Vivian was jealous, knew she was difficult, but I never imagined she was capable of that level of cruelty. And my mother... His voice hardened. My mother stood there and made it worse, chose protecting our image over basic human decency. Amira said nothing, letting the silence stretch. I'm going to make this right, Damien said finally. I don't know how yet, but I will, even if it means burning down everything my family built. That's not your choice to make, Amira said quietly, and it's not your burden to carry. What happened wasn't about you, but it was because of my family, because I brought you into that world thinking I could protect you from the worst of it. He laughed bitterly. I was arrogant enough to believe I had control, that I could manage Vivian, manage my mother, manage the situation. I was wrong. Amira looked at the encrypted files still open on her laptop, at the evidence that could complete the Vale family's destruction. She thought about power, about revenge, about the difference between justice and retaliation. Damien, she said slowly, if you really want to make this right, you need to ask yourself a question. Are you willing to choose what's right over what's family? The line went quiet for so long, she thought he might have hung up. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, I already have. After the call ended, Amira sat in the growing darkness of her apartment, the city lights beginning to twinkle outside her windows. She thought about the last 48 hours, about champagne dripping down her face, about flashbulbs and screaming and cold dismissal. But she also thought about the thousands of messages of support, about her board standing unanimously behind her, about her employees rallying to her defense, about the world watching a black woman refuse to break and finding inspiration in that refusal. Vivian Vale had tried to humiliate her, had tried to put her in what she considered her place, had tried to prove that women like Amira didn't belong in rooms like that. Instead, Vivian had shown the world exactly why women like Amira were the future, while people like the Vales were rapidly becoming the past. Leon came back in, setting down coffee. "What are you thinking about?" "Strategy," Amira said. "Timing. The difference between defending yourself and destroying others. You're thinking about those files. I'm thinking about what kind of leader I want to be." She turned to face him. "Vivienne tried to drag me down into her ugliness. I won't do the same. But you'll use the information if you need to. I'll protect myself and my company, but I won't strike first." She closed the laptop. "The Vales are doing a fine job destroying themselves. Sometimes the best revenge is just stepping back and letting people face the consequences of their own actions." Leon smiled slightly. "That's very evolved of you. That's very strategic of me." Amira stood, stretching tired muscles. "But Leon, if they come after me again, if they try to retaliate or attack my company, I won't hesitate to use every piece of ammunition I have." "Good," Leon said firmly, "because dignity is powerful, but so is defending what you've built." Outside, the city continued its endless rhythm. News trucks were still parked on her street. Social media was still exploding with commentary. Vale Global's stock was still cratering. The scandal that started with one bottle of champagne had become a wildfire, consuming everything in its path. And in the center of it all, Amira Carter stood tall, soaked in humiliation but crowned in dignity, attacked by an empire but defended by the world. Vivian Vale had wanted to destroy her. Instead, she'd created a legend. 3 days after the gala, Amira sat in her office at dawn. The encrypted files spread across 3 monitors like pieces of a puzzle she was finally beginning to understand. Leon had gone home hours ago, insisting she needed rest. But sleep felt impossible when she was holding dynamite with a lit fuse. The documents were meticulous. Whoever had compiled them had spent months, maybe years, gathering evidence. Shell companies traced through the Cayman Islands, tax returns that didn't match reported income, email chains discussing discriminatory hiring practices with shocking casualness. And at the center of it all, Margot Vale's digital signature on documents that would make any prosecutor's career. But what made Amira's blood run cold wasn't just the scale of the fraud. It was the dates. These weren't ancient crimes buried in Vale Global's history. The most recent transaction was from 2 weeks ago. A fraudulent asset transfer of $8 million routed through 3 different countries before landing in an account registered to a shell corporation Margot controlled. They were still doing it, still stealing, still believing they were untouchable. Amira pulled up the metadata on the files, and Leon's earlier analysis proved correct. The documents had been accessed from within Vale Global's secure server system, but the digital fingerprints had been carefully scrubbed. Whoever sent these knew how to cover their tracks. Almost. One tiny detail remained. The files had been compiled using software only available to C-suite executives at Vale Global. The list of people with that kind of access was short. Damien Vale was on it. Her phone buzzed. A new message from the anonymous sender coming through the same encrypted channel. Check your office mail. Physical evidence to corroborate the digital files. Use it wisely. Amira felt her pulse quicken. Whoever this was, they were escalating. Moving from digital breadcrumbs to physical evidence meant they wanted to ensure she could build an airtight case. But why? What did they have to gain from destroying the Vale Empire from within? The sun was fully up when Leon arrived, carrying breakfast and looking like he'd actually gotten some sleep. His eyes went straight to her monitors, then to her face, reading the intensity there. "You've been here all night." "I found something." Amira pulled up a particular file, a thread of emails between Margot and Vivienne dated 3 weeks before the gala. "Look at this." Leon leaned in, scanning the text, and his expression darkened. The emails discussed Amira specifically. Margot writing, "We need to establish dominance early, make her understand the hierarchy." Vivienne responding, "Leave it to me. I'll handle the uppity newcomer." The words were damning. This wasn't about a spontaneous outburst fueled by champagne. Vivienne had been planning to humiliate Amira for weeks, and Margot had sanctioned it. "They weaponized that gala," Leon said quietly. "The invitation wasn't about partnership. It was about putting you in your place. And when that didn't work, Vivienne escalated." Amira closed the file, feeling the weight of premeditated cruelty. The seating chart change, the toast, all of it was designed to break me before the attack even happened. "Which means you have proof of intent." Leon straightened. "Amira, this changes everything. This isn't just assault, it's a coordinated attack with racial motivation. The legal implications are massive." Before Amira could respond, her assistant's voice came through the intercom. "Ms. Carter, there's a package for you. It was left at the front desk early this morning. No return address. Bring it in, please." The package was a plain manila envelope, thick with contents. Inside, Amira found printed bank statements, notarized affidavits from former Vale Global employees detailing discrimination they'd witnessed, and photographs of documents that looked like they'd been taken covertly in Margot's private office. At the bottom of the envelope was a burner phone and a single note written in precise handwriting. "When you're ready to talk, turn this on. You're not the target. Vivienne is. She's destroyed too many people. I need her out." Leon picked up the phone, examining it. "Whoever this is, they're serious. They're not just handing you ammunition. They're asking for alliance. Or setting a trap. Maybe." Leon set the phone down carefully. "But why go through all this trouble for a trap? They could have just let the Vale family's lawyers come after you directly." Amira stared at the phone, her mind working through scenarios. Someone inside the Vale Empire wanted Vivienne removed, wanted the corruption exposed, and had chosen Amira as the vehicle for that destruction. It was strategic, calculated, and dangerous. "There's something else," Leon said, pulling up news on his tablet. "Victor Hale's takeover bid is accelerating. He's acquired 19% of Vale stock now and is pushing for an emergency shareholder meeting. The board is in chaos." The feeding frenzy had begun. While the Vales fought their public relations disaster, vultures circled their wounded empire. Amira's office phone rang, her private line. She answered to find Damien's voice, and for the first time since the gala, he sounded more than devastated. He sounded frightened. "Amira, please don't hang up. Something's happening. Something bad." "What are you talking about?" "My mother. She's scrambling to move assets. I caught her yesterday transferring money between accounts, destroying documents in her office. When I confronted her, she told me to stay out of family business." His voice dropped. "But it's not family business, it's criminal business. I think she knows something's coming." Amira's eyes met Leon's. Margot knew. Somehow she'd realized the documents were compromised. "Damien, where are you right now?" "At the main office. There's an emergency board meeting in an hour. Victor Hale is making his move, and my mother is trying to rally votes to block him." He paused. "I found something else. Vivienne's been hiding gambling debts, millions of dollars. My mother used company funds to cover them up." The pieces clicked into place. Margot wasn't just protecting the family's reputation. She was covering up multiple crimes, any one of which could send her to prison. "How deep does it go?" Amira asked. "I don't know, but I'm trying to find out." His voice hardened. "I'm done protecting them, done making excuses. If my family has been breaking the law, they need to face consequences." After he hung up, Amira sat back, processing. Damien had said he'd already chosen integrity over family. But was he the one who'd sent the files? Had he been systematically documenting his family's crimes, building a case against them while still playing the loyal son? "We need to make a decision," Leon said. "These files are a loaded gun. Do we hand them to prosecutors now, or do we wait?" Amira considered the question carefully. Striking now would be aggressive, would put the Vales on the defensive, but it would also make her look vindictive, like someone seeking revenge rather than justice. "We wait," she decided. "We let them continue destroying themselves, but we prepare our defense in case they come after us. And if Vivian escalates again, then we don't just defend." Amira's voice was steel. "We end it." The morning headlines brought fresh chaos. Vivian had posted another social media rant, this time claiming that Amira had seduced Damien to manipulate the family, and that the whole scandal was a calculated play for power. The post was unhinged, rambling, filled with barely coded racist language that made even her supporters uncomfortable. The backlash was immediate and vicious. Major brands that had partnerships with Vivian's lifestyle company began severing ties. Influencers who'd once courted her attention now posted statements condemning her behavior. The fashion magazine that had featured her on last month's cover issued an apology for platforming someone with such deeply troubling views. But Vivian couldn't stop. Within hours, she'd gone on an Instagram livestream, her makeup smudged, her voice shrill, doubling down on every accusation. She claimed Amira was playing the victim and that people like her were using diversity as a weapon against traditional families. Amira watched the live stream with Leon, both of them stunned by how completely Vivienne was destroying herself. "She's having a breakdown," Leon said. "A very public, very documented breakdown." "No," Amira corrected quietly. "She's showing everyone who she's always been. We're just watching the mask fall off." By afternoon, Vale Global's board had called an emergency meeting to discuss removing Vivienne from any official capacity within the company. The vote was 9-1 in favor of her removal. The single dissenting vote came from Margot, who'd fought viciously to protect her daughter until the very end. Security footage of Vivian being escorted from Vale Global headquarters went viral. She screamed about betrayal, about the family business being hers, about conspiracies and manipulation. The image of her being walked out by security guards became the defining photo of the scandal's next phase. The empire wasn't just cracking, it was shattering in real time. That evening, Amira received another encrypted message. "Tomorrow, federal investigation begins. Margot knows. Watch what happens next." She barely slept that night, anticipation coiled tight in her chest. Whoever was feeding her information had inside knowledge of law enforcement activity. That level of access meant someone very close to the center of power. Dawn came with chaos. Amira woke to news alerts flooding her phone. Federal agents had raided 3 Vale Global properties at sunrise: corporate headquarters, Margot's private office, and the family estate. News helicopters circled overhead, broadcasting live footage of agents carrying boxes of documents out of the building. The image of Margot Vale being escorted out by federal investigators became the biggest headline of the year. Her face was pale, her usual composure shattered, her expensive clothes rumpled as if she'd dressed in the dark. For the first time in her life, Margot Vale looked small. Amira watched the coverage with something like awe. This was justice moving, slow but inevitable, grinding the mighty into dust. Leon called, his voice urgent. "Turn on Channel 7. Right now." She switched channels to find a press conference. Federal prosecutors standing at a podium, announcing an investigation into Vail Global for fraud, tax evasion, money laundering, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. They listed charges that made Amira's leaked documents look like the tip of an iceberg. "This investigation has been ongoing for 6 months," the lead prosecutor announced. "Recent evidence brought to our attention has accelerated our timeline and expanded the scope of potential charges." 6 months. Someone inside Vail Global had been cooperating with federal investigators for half a year. Someone who'd watched the gala attack and decided to send Amira the evidence so she could protect herself, while the legal machinery ground forward. Her phone rang. "Damien, did you do this?" His voice wasn't accusatory, just stunned, almost awed. "No," Amira said honestly, "but I know who did." Silence stretched between them, heavy with implication. "I need to see you," Damien said finally. "Please. Not as a business negotiation, not as an apology. Just, I need to see you." Against her better judgment, Amira agreed. She chose a neutral location, a quiet coffee shop far from either of their offices, where they could talk without being immediately recognized. Damien looked like he'd aged a decade in a week. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes exhausted, his usual polish completely gone. When he sat down across from her, she could see his hands trembling slightly. "My family is finished," he said without preamble. "The federal charges, the stock collapse, partners fleeing, employees revolting, it's over." "Yes," Amira agreed, "it is. I've been asked to testify, to cooperate with prosecutors." He met her eyes. "I'm going to do it. I'm going to tell them everything I know about the fraud, the cover-ups, the illegal activities. All of it." Amira studied him, looking for calculation or strategy. But all she saw was a man who'd finally hit bedrock, who'd lost everything except his integrity. "That will destroy whatever's left of your family." "My family destroyed themselves." His voice was bitter. "I just refused to go down with them." "When did you start documenting their crimes?" The question hung in the air. Damien's expression shifted. Surprise, then something like relief. "You know." "I suspected. The files were too thorough, too precisely targeted, and the access required." She leaned forward. "Why, Damien? Why blow up your entire world?" He was quiet for a long moment, choosing his words carefully. "Because watching what they did to you made me realize I'd been complicit my entire life. Every time I looked away from my sister's cruelty, every time I excused my mother's ruthlessness, every time I told myself it was just business, just tradition, just the way things were done." He laughed bitterly. "I thought I was the good one because I wasn't actively cruel. But silence is complicity, and I was very, very silent. So you decided to burn it all down. I decided to choose what was right over what was easy." He met her eyes. "I didn't send you those files for revenge, Amira. I sent them because if my family came after you legally, and they were planning to, you deserved to have leverage. You deserved to be able to defend yourself with the truth." Amira absorbed this, feeling the weight of his confession. Damien Vail had committed family suicide to give her ammunition, had documented his own mother's crimes, had chosen a stranger's dignity over his dynasty's survival. "The federal investigation," she said slowly. "That was already happening. For months, I've been cooperating since March, quietly handing over documents, testifying in secret. But after the gala," his voice hardened, "after what Vivian did, after my mother stood there and chose cruelty over decency, I accelerated everything. Made sure prosecutors had what they needed to move fast. You used me. I gave you the truth." Damien's expression was steady. "What you do with it is your choice. But I wanted you to know who you were really dealing with before you signed anything, before you trusted any of us." Amira sat back, processing the enormity of what he'd done. Damien hadn't just leaked documents. He'd systematically dismantled his family's empire from within, brick by brick, crime by crime. He'd been the mole, the informant, the insider who'd chosen justice over blood. "Your mother," Amira said. "She knows it was you?" "Not yet, but she will soon." He smiled without humor. "I imagine that conversation will be our last." "And Vivian?" "Vivian is being charged separately. Assault, fraud, corporate sabotage. She's facing actual prison time." He paused. "She still doesn't think she did anything wrong. Still believes she was protecting the family from you." "She was protecting herself from irrelevance," Amira corrected. "I was just a convenient target." They sat in silence for a moment, the coffee shop's ambient noise washing over them. Amira thought about power, about privilege, about the courage it took to dismantle everything you'd been given in the name of doing right. "I'm not asking for forgiveness," Damien said quietly. "And I'm not asking for gratitude. I just wanted you to know the truth before it all comes out in court." "Why tell me at all? You could have stayed anonymous." "Because you deserved to know." He stood, preparing to leave. "And because whatever happens next, whatever the prosecutors uncover, whatever sentences get handed down, I wanted you to know that at least one person in my family saw you for who you really are. Not a threat. Not an outsider. Just someone brilliant and strong who deserved better than what she got in that ballroom." After he left, Amira sat alone with her coffee, watching through the window as Damien disappeared into the crowd. A man walking away from his name, his legacy, his family's empire. Walking toward nothing except his own integrity. It was the bravest thing she'd ever witnessed. That night, the dominoes continued falling. Vale Global's remaining board members held an emergency vote and officially suspended Margot from all leadership positions pending the outcome of the federal investigation. Major investors announced they were divesting completely. The company's credit rating was downgraded to junk status. And Victor Hale's hostile takeover? Federal prosecutors announced they were investigating him, too. Turned out his aggressive stock purchases had involved illegal market manipulation and insider trading. The predator had become prey, caught in the same net he'd thought to exploit. Amira watched it all unfold from her office, Leon beside her, both of them witnessing the complete implosion of an American dynasty. "How do you feel?" Leon asked. "Vindicated," Amira said honestly. "And sad. Not for them, for what this represents. How much corruption existed, how many people must have been hurt over the years, how normalized it all became. But it's ending now, because of you, not because of me." Amira shook her head. "Because one person inside that family chose to tell the truth. Because employees found the courage to speak up. Because the system, broken as it is, sometimes still works." She turned to Leon. "I was just the catalyst, the moment that made everything else impossible to ignore." Her phone buzzed. Another encrypted message, the last one she'd received from the anonymous sender. "Thank you for being exactly who you are. The world needs more leaders like you. This is goodbye. Stay strong. Tibwatsidee." Amira stared at the message, feeling the weight of everything Damien had sacrificed. His family, his inheritance, his name. All of it traded for the simple dignity of being able to look himself in the mirror. "What now?" Leon asked. Amira closed her laptop, feeling lighter than she had in weeks. "Now we rebuild. We focus on our work, our company, our actual mission. We let the lawyers and prosecutors handle the Vale family, and we prove that the best revenge isn't destruction, it's success." "That's very zen of you. That's very practical of me." Amira smiled. "I don't need the Vales destroyed. I need them irrelevant, and that's already happening." Outside her window, the city lights sparkled like promises. Somewhere out there, Damien Vale was starting over with nothing. Vivienne was facing charges that could send her to prison. Margot was watching her carefully constructed empire crumble. And Victor Hale was learning that predators sometimes got caught in their own traps. But in this office, in this moment, Amira Carter sat secure in the knowledge that she'd faced down the worst they could throw at her and emerged unbroken. The dynasty had fallen, and she was still standing. The months following the federal raids moved with the peculiar momentum of institutional justice, glacially slow in paperwork, brutally fast in consequences. Vale Global hemorrhaged value like a wounded animal, its stock dropping from $87 a share to $11 in just 6 weeks. Partners fled. Contracts dissolved. The company that had once been synonymous with American business aristocracy became a cautionary tale taught in business schools. Amira watched it unfold from a distance, focusing instead on her own company's explosive growth. The scandal had made her a household name, but more importantly, it had made her a symbol. Orders flooded in from cities and countries that wanted infrastructure built by someone who represented integrity over legacy. Her technology became synonymous with ethical leadership, and within 3 months she'd expanded operations into 18 new markets. Leon had been promoted to president, and together they'd launched Integrity Tech, a new initiative focused on transparency, diversity, and anti-corruption systems in infrastructure development. The program became an industry standard almost overnight, with competitors scrambling to develop similar frameworks just to keep pace. But despite the success, despite the validation, Amira found herself thinking about the upcoming trial, about justice, about what it would mean to sit in a courtroom and face the people who'd tried to destroy her dignity in front of the world. The trial was scheduled to begin in late autumn, nearly 6 months after that disastrous gala. Margot and Vivienne would be tried together, a prosecutorial strategy designed to show the scope of Vale family corruption. Damien would testify for the prosecution, a decision that had made international headlines and sparked endless think pieces about loyalty, family, and moral courage. 3 days before the trial, Margot's lawyers reached out with a settlement offer. Amira sat in her attorney's office, reading the terms with something between disbelief and dark amusement. "They're offering you $50 million to not testify," her attorney Sarah explained, her expression carefully neutral. "They'd plead to lesser charges and you'd sign an NDA about the incident at the gala. $50 million to pretend it didn't happen," Amira said flatly. "Essentially, yes." Leon, sitting beside her, made a disgusted sound. "They're trying to buy your silence, again, as if you're something that can be purchased." Amira thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "No, I'm testifying. The world needs to see what they did, needs to hear it in a courtroom where they can't control the narrative." Sarah nodded as if she'd expected nothing less. "I'll inform their counsel. But Amira, be prepared. They're going to try to destroy you on that stand. They'll dig into your past, question your motives, suggest you orchestrated the whole thing for publicity. Let them try." Amira's voice was steel. "I have something they don't." "What's that?" "The truth." The morning the trial began, Amira woke before dawn. She chose her outfit carefully, a tailored navy suit, simple jewelry, her hair pulled back in a professional style. She looked like exactly what she was, a successful CEO who'd been assaulted at a formal event and refused to be silenced. The courthouse was surrounded by media. News trucks lined every available space. Protesters held signs supporting Amira, or, less commonly, defending the Vale family's persecution. Security was tight, with metal detectors and multiple checkpoints. Inside, the courtroom was packed, every seat filled, every inch of standing room claimed. Amira saw familiar faces, business colleagues, employees from her company, activists who'd rallied behind her story. And in the front row of the defendants section, she saw Margot and Vivienne. Margot looked diminished but defiant, her expensive suit armor against the indignity of being tried like a common criminal. But Vivienne looked hollowed out, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape that didn't exist. Damien sat on the prosecution's side, separated from his family by more than just physical distance. When his eyes met Amira's, he offered a small nod. She returned it. The judge entered, and the trial began. The prosecution's opening statement was devastating. They outlined years of fraud, meticulously documented through the evidence Damien had provided. Tax evasion totaling over $200 million. Money laundering through shell companies. Discriminatory practices covered up through legal intimidation. And at the center of it all, Margot Vale, orchestrating everything with ruthless efficiency. But they didn't stop there. They connected the corporate crimes to the gala incident, showing how the Vale family's culture of entitlement and supremacy had culminated in Vivienne's attack. They called it what it was, a hate crime, premeditated and executed in front of hundreds of witnesses. Vivienne's attorney tried to paint her as unstable, a victim of mental illness who'd acted impulsively. But the prosecution had those emails, Margot and Vivienne planning the humiliation weeks in advance. The defense strategy crumbled before it even began. The first week of trial was technical testimony. Forensic accountants, FBI investigators, former employees who'd witnessed discrimination firsthand. Each day added another layer to the portrait of systematic corruption. Then came Damien's testimony. The courtroom fell silent as he took the stand. Reporters leaned forward. Sketch artists worked frantically. Margot's expression turned glacial, while Vivienne looked at her brother with something like betrayal. The prosecutor walked him through it methodically. When had he first suspected criminal activity? How long had he documented it? What made him decide to cooperate with authorities? Damien's answers were measured, pained, but unflinching. I realized I had a choice. I could protect my family's reputation by staying silent, or I could protect the employees, the shareholders, the public by telling the truth. I chose truth. Even knowing it would destroy your family, my family destroyed itself. Damien looked directly at Margot. I just refused to help them cover it up anymore. The defense attorney's cross-examination was brutal. She accused him of betrayal, of pursuing a relationship with Amira Carter by tearing down his own family. She suggested he'd manufactured evidence out of sibling rivalry. But Damien didn't break. I didn't manufacture anything. I documented what was already there, and I did it because I finally understood that loyalty to family doesn't mean protecting them from consequences. It means loving them enough to demand they do better. When he stepped down, Vivienne was crying silently, mascara running down her face. But they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of rage. The second week brought victim testimony. Former employees who'd been harassed and forced to sign NDAs. Shareholders who'd lost fortunes while the Vales secretly profited. Each story added weight to the prosecution's case. Then it was Amira's turn. She'd prepared for this moment, rehearsed with Sarah, steeled herself for whatever attacks would come. But as she walked to the witness stand, past Margot's cold stare and Vivienne's tear-stained face, she felt the weight of everyone who'd ever been dismissed, humiliated, or told they didn't belong. She wasn't just testifying for herself. She was testifying for all of them. The prosecutor began gently, establishing the timeline, the merger proposal, the gala invitation, the careful preparation for an evening meant to symbolize partnership. What happened when you arrived at the Vale estate? I was treated with thinly veiled hostility from the moment I entered, Amira said clearly. The seating chart had been changed to place me away from the business leadership. Comments were made about my background, my success, my presence being unusual for that environment. Did you understand these comments to have racial undertones? Yes, it was made very clear that I was viewed as an outsider who didn't belong. The prosecutor walked her through the evening, building to the moment itself. When they reached it, the courtroom was silent enough to hear breathing. Describe what happened when Vivian Vale approached your table. Amira's voice remained steady, but she let the emotion show. Let the jury see the human cost of what had happened. She told me that women like me don't belong in rooms like that. She said I certainly didn't belong in her family's future. Then she poured an entire bottle of champagne over my head while cameras recorded everything. What did you do? I sat still. I didn't scream or cry or give her the reaction she wanted. I just sat there, covered in champagne, while everyone watched. And what did Margot Vale do? She told me the evening was over for me. She dismissed me from the event as if I were the problem, not her daughter who'd just committed assault. The defense attorney's cross-examination was exactly as vicious as Sarah had predicted. She questioned Amira's motives, suggested the merger was failing anyway, implied Amira had somehow provoked Vivian. Isn't it true that you wore white specifically to draw attention to yourself? I wore white because it's elegant and professional, Amira replied calmly. If my presence drew attention, that says more about the room than it does about me. You've profited tremendously from this incident, haven't you? Your company's value has tripled. My company grew because we do excellent work and because people want to support ethical leadership, not because I was assaulted at a party. Isn't it convenient that you had all this evidence against the Vale family, almost as if you were looking for a reason to destroy them? I didn't have that evidence until someone sent it to me after the attack, and I didn't use it to destroy them. I used it to defend myself when your clients tried to retaliate. The attorney tried different angles, but Amira didn't waver. She'd built a company from nothing, negotiated with some of the toughest people in business, and survived having champagne poured on her head in front of the world. One hostile lawyer wasn't going to break her. When she stepped down, she caught Damien's eye again. He looked proud. And despite everything, despite all the pain and chaos, Amira felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition. Understanding of what it cost him to sit on that stand and tell the truth. The third week brought expert witnesses on discrimination, assault, and corporate malfeasance. Each testimony added another nail to the coffin of the Vale defense. Then, in a move that shocked everyone, Vivienne insisted on testifying in her own defense. Against her lawyer's obvious advice, Vivienne took the stand with the same wild energy she'd had during her social media meltdowns. She claimed Amira had seduced Damien, manipulated the family, orchestrated the whole scandal for publicity and profit. She came into our world trying to take everything we'd built. Vivian's voice rose, hysterical. She used her background, her story, everything to make people feel sorry for her while she destroyed us. The prosecutor let her talk, let her dig her own grave with every word. Then calmly, he presented the emails, the planning, the premeditation. Vivian's own words about handling the uppity newcomer. Ms. Vale, these emails show you plan to humiliate Ms. Carter weeks before the gala. How do you explain that? Vivian's composure shattered completely. She deserved it. She was trying to take what was ours. She didn't belong. The courtroom erupted. The judge called for order, but the damage was done. Vivian had just confessed to premeditated assault with clear racial motivation in front of a jury, cameras, and the world. Her attorney looked like she wanted to disappear. Margot closed her eyes as if in pain. And Amira sat perfectly still, watching justice unfold in real time. The prosecution rested their case 3 days later. The defense put up a weak showing. Character witnesses who seemed unconvincing, technical experts whose testimony was shredded on cross-examination. It was clear even to casual observers that the verdict was inevitable. The jury deliberated for just under 6 hours. When they returned, the verdict was read in a courtroom so quiet that the clerk's voice seemed to echo. Guilty on all counts for Margot: fraud, embezzlement, tax evasion, obstruction of justice. For Vivienne, assault, fraud, conspiracy, and hate crime enhancements on multiple charges. Margot's face remained impassive, but her hands trembled. Vivienne screamed, had to be restrained by bailiffs, kept shouting about injustice and persecution as she was led from the courtroom. Damien sat with his head bowed, and Amira couldn't tell if he was relieved or devastated. Probably both. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. Margot received a suspended sentence with heavy fines and a lifetime ban from serving on any corporate board. The judge's words were harsh. You used your privilege as a weapon and your wealth as a shield. Justice demands you lose both. Vivienne was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison with mandatory psychiatric evaluation and anger management. The hate crime enhancements added additional time. She'd serve at least 2 years before being eligible for parole. As the sentences were read, Amira felt something she hadn't expected. Not triumph, not satisfaction, just a quiet sense of closure. The system, imperfect as it was, had worked. The powerful had been held accountable. Justice had been served. Outside the courthouse, media swarmed. Amira gave a brief statement, her words carefully chosen. This was never about revenge. It was about accountability, about ensuring that wealth and status don't place anyone above basic human decency. I hope this verdict sends a message that discrimination, assault, and corruption have consequences, no matter who commits them. The questions came rapid fire, but she'd said what she needed to say. Leon guided her toward the waiting car, shielding her from the most aggressive reporters. As they drove away, Amira looked back at the courthouse, at the symbol of justice carved above its doors, and felt the weight of 6 months finally lifting from her shoulders. 3 months after the trial, Amira hosted her own charity gala, not at a family estate, not dripping with old money and older prejudices. Instead, she rented a modern event space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, filled it with diverse leaders from every industry, and focused the entire evening on youth education and infrastructure development in underserved communities. The difference from the Veil Gala was stark. Here, laughter was genuine. Conversations were substantive rather than performative. Success was celebrated without the constant undercurrent of comparison and competition. Leon had been promoted again, officially becoming her co-CEO. Together, they'd built something bigger than either of them had imagined, a company that proved profit and principles weren't mutually exclusive. As Amira moved through the crowd, accepting congratulations and discussing new partnerships, she felt at peace in a way she hadn't since before that disastrous invitation arrived. Near the end of the evening, she noticed a figure standing at the periphery. Damien, dressed simply, looking uncertain about whether he should have come. She made her way over to him, and he offered a tentative smile. "I wasn't sure you'd want me here." "You RSVP'd. I approved the guest list." Amira's tone was neutral, but not unkind. "How are you?" "Starting over." Damien gestured vaguely. "I sold my remaining assets, distributed everything to the employees who were hurt by my family's fraud. I'm working as a consultant now, helping companies improve their ethical practices. It's honest work." "That's good. I'm not here to ask for anything," he said quickly. "I just wanted to see you succeed. Wanted to be in a room where you were celebrated the way you should have been that night." Amira studied him. This man who'd sacrificed everything, family, wealth, legacy, for the simple dignity of doing right. He looked lighter now, despite having lost everything, as if the weight of complicity had been crushing him all along. "You did the right thing," she said finally, testifying, cooperating, choosing integrity. I know, but it still cost me my family. You didn't lose your family, Damien. They lost you. Amira's voice was gentle but firm. There's a difference. He nodded, accepting the truth of it. I should go. I just wanted you to know, watching you stand in that courtroom, telling your truth, refusing to be diminished. It reminded me what courage looks like. Courage looks like walking away from everything you've ever known because it's the right thing to do, Amira countered. You showed me that. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. Two people who'd been through something extraordinary together, who'd each made choices that changed the trajectory of their lives. Would you like to stay? Amira asked impulsively, not as a veil, just as someone who believes in what we're building here. Damien's surprise was evident. You'd want that? I'm building something new, Damien. Something that rewards integrity over inheritance, character over connections. If you truly believe in that vision, she paused, then extended her hand. Then yes, I'd want that. He shook her hand, and the gesture felt like more than just politeness. It felt like possibility, like closure and new beginning woven together. As the evening wound down, Amira stood at the window overlooking the city lights. Leon joined her, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. Hell of a year, he said, offering her one. Amira took it, staring at the golden liquid, remembering another bottle of champagne under very different circumstances. Then she raised her glass. To integrity. To integrity, Leon echoed. They drank, and the champagne tasted like victory, like vindication, like the future she'd built from the ashes of humiliation. Across the room, guests mingled and laughed. Young professionals of every background, united not by wealth or legacy, but by shared vision and ethical purpose. This was the world Amira was creating, one where talent mattered more than tradition, where dignity was non-negotiable, where a black woman from nothing could build an empire that would outlast all the old dynasties combined. The Vale estate was being sold, piece by piece, to cover fines and restitution. The family name was synonymous with scandal and corruption. Their legacy was ruin. But Amira's legacy was just beginning. She thought about the woman who'd walked into that gala 6 months ago, elegant in white, hoping for partnership but ready for war. That woman had been tested in ways she couldn't have imagined, had been humiliated in front of the world, had every expectation weaponized against her, and she'd stood through all of it, had stood while champagne dripped down her face, had stood while the world watched, had stood in a courtroom and told her truth, had stood until everyone else fell down. No whine, no shame, no dynasty hovering above her. Just a black woman who'd risen above humiliation and built her own empire on integrity. In the end, that was the only legacy that mattered, the only one that would last. When someone tries to humiliate you in front of the world, do you break, or do you stand so still that everyone watching realizes the real power was yours all along? If this story moved you, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of dignity, justice, and the courage it takes to rise above cruelty.